I really want to acknowledge that Jorge, Guadron, can you come up here and join me and Day Chan, our elected official and hopefully soon to be elected official. We're working really hard to team up to protect and speak up for the voices of our community more. And our Vignori here from the Suffolk County Legislature should be joining us shortly. And with that, I'd love to have Jorge. Would you like to give some remarks?
Thank you very much, Kelly. Good morning, everyone. I'm City Councilman of Guadron. I represent North Very Short of Brentwood and areas of Central Islip, which is District 1. In 2020, the town was ordered to come out new councilman districts, and I was fortunate enough that District 1 is exactly where I live in. And obviously, when it comes to governing, being the only council member from the opposing party becomes a lot difficult to govern and try to take things down for my community. However, we have candidates like Dave and Katie. This council issued the bill. They have the best talent that we need then to provide the coming walks. Obviously, I was having a chance at obtain every on this morning and making some suggestion that I keep my work because being the only council member from the opposing party doesn't really help much. So we need somebody else. We need Dave to come on board so that we can have a little more balanced council. Now, when it comes to the legislature, we obviously know that the Republicans have majority of the legislature, and we need our working people to represent our working families, and that is Kelly and her family. So I strongly suggest and recommend that please, let us amplify her message that we need Kelly at the legislature. And obviously, when that happens, we will be having a better county and a better allies to the customer. Thank you very much.
And we are so fortunate to have the time of our minority leader at the Suffolk County Legislature, Jason Richberg.
I thought Jorge was going to be a hundred kiss. But thank you all for being here. And thank you for supporting our great candidates here in the town of Islip. As you know, or as you see around the country, everything is topsy-turvy. And we need dynamic leaders, we need vocal leaders, and we need people of conscience to step into seats of power. And for so long, we have been imbalanced in the town of Islip. We need to strike that balance back, and that's why we have these two candidates here. But more importantly, really, you and your energy will help support you. Yep. We see these two candidates, and you see the power and the voice that they have. But it's only as long as the commitment they get from the communities, the doors that they cannot, but more importantly, funds that they can raise. So by having these funds, these small fundraisers like this, this is a gateway to get, a good way, a gateway drug to get more folks onto the bandwagon and investing in these campaigns. And so I'm confident both of them in this race. But more important, we need you to endorse them to your friends and family. Okay. Read everybody hears you get their figured out, text spot or send people, tell them that we need them to get out and vote. We know that this election cycle is odd years. For a county legislature, it's a 1-year term, but we know that this election will probably be a 15, 20, and 25% current. That's atrocious. But we can make a change in that seat. Both of these seats, people get out and start voting. People go out individually and reach out to friends and neighbors and say, listen, I met these people. I met Kelly. I met Dave. Dave. And this is what they had said. This is what's important to me. These are the issues that are going on to me, and this is how it will affect me. A lot of times we have these conversations, the esoteric conversation about politics, about how it affects the grandiose struggles. Unfortunately, we need to bring it back to normal. We need to start talking about child care. We need to talk about the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts and community events and investing in our communities. And how local communities aren't getting invested in, how our fields aren't being used. But if you don't bring those conversations to your table, we had coffee with your friends, they make their doppels. And I also ask you all, you have the ability to open up your rooms to invite your friends and neighbors to meet in their house. So this way, we can take that race straight to their good. Thank you very much, sir. Congratulations.
So this teamwork that we're seeing between the county and the town is what Day Chan and I are hoping to bring to our local area. And so with that, I want to go to our keynote speaker and thank our candidate and elected representatives. We'll hear from Dave in a little bit. Thanks to you guys. And so this whole team that we're talking about is here. We're all here, we're all fighting for clean water. But we want to do that with facts and information and the best solution that we could find together. And so with that, we are bringing experts to the table, and I want to welcome Dr. Sarah Meyland, who is our keynote speaker today. Do come up and join me. So Dr. Sarah Meyland is one of the foremost experts from Long Island related to aquifers, groundwater, clean water. So with that, we're going to have some special remarks. First, she'll tell you all of her background about why we're so lucky to have this time together to hear it. And then she'll go into some of the current state of our situation. And we're going to open up for live question and answers to go into Facebook, because this campaign, as my fellow colleagues are up here, it's all about transparency and information. We're providing information, but we believe in people, and we think people will make better choices with more information. So with that, can we hear your background? Okay, here.
So I'm very pleased to have an opportunity to speak to you this morning. It's a beautiful day, and it's a great time to talk about water and the environment. I'm not background includes being the co-executive director of the New York State Legislative Commission on Water Resources of Long Island. I've also worked at a Suffolk County Water Authority as a watershed director. I've been a college professor in New York Institute of Technology for decades. I've worked at the Nassau County Planning Federation, and I've also been in the local environment. So I'm here today to kind of share my experience and expertise with you, and what I got how you do. I just have a few really basic comments about water, and then I know whenever we have questions, but I'd be happy to any questions you have, but this kind of attitude I bring this with. So first of all, the main question that Nancy Kelly wanted me to address was, what is the state of our water supply and water supply here on Long Island? And I wrote just a really quick answer to that question, which is our aquifers are fragile, and they're becoming degraded and overpumped as time goes on. We are not at the end of the road. In other words, we're not in the climate conscious industry, but there's less and less water in our aquifers that is not that affected by human activity. And one of the interesting aspects of talking about water is that when you mention water, people have different ideas of what you're talking about. But you're a beach robber or a king, maybe go or swim the lake and lakes and just stuff like that. Water to you is the surface water. Water on the surface of as lake, rivers, springs, things like that. And then if you're concerned about your drinking water, then water means to you the groundwater, which is the source of organic water. So kind of becomes confusing if people when they say water quality is 4. You don't verify you're talking about surface water or where you come with that groundwater. And in the case of Long Island, we use surface water for recreation, and we use groundwater for making water supply. So people have a vested interest in knowing more about whether you're talking about surface water or groundwater. So my expertise is more oriented for groundwater. Is talking about that as a resource here on Long Island because it was so essential to the prosperity and the health of everyone who lives here. I should mention that groundwater and surface water do not operate the same. So if you know a lot about surface water, you may not know that much about groundwater. So that's why when people hear about groundwater, it may not be that drawn of the issue because they don't really know that much about groundwater. It isn't just like surface water, and it is not. The other thing to know is that with 2 counties in Nassau and Suffolk, the counties are not at the same place when you talk about water quality being quite proper. Nassau was developed before Suffolk. Is 1/3 to 1/4 the size of Suffolk. It had for a long time a high population and developed and covered over the landscape much sooner than Suffolk did. And so it's further along in the impact of the number of problems that they have in Nassau County. Suffolk is just following the path of Nassau, but more slowly. It's like Nassau County, Suffolk County money of all this water cheats from the outer Brookhaven. That's a situation I saw. I could talk about problems in general, but sometimes the detailed duty is slightly different than whether you're addressing Suffolk issues, Nassau. The other thing is that
Does anybody, the next curve, any questions that anybody wants to ask? Was everyone aware? So when we're talking about water issues in Suffolk County, we cannot just jump to activity that happened in NASA, which is fear-mongering, to say that that's going to be what happens in Suffolk. NASA made decision, and they are where they are because they made those decisions. And with transparency and leadership and bringing the community along, we can make better decisions for Suffolk so we are not in the same situation, right? Is that yes, Jim?
What is a decision that Nassau made that we have to make sure we don't follow suit?
Well, Kelly was just referring to Iraq in the 70s and into the 80s. Nationally, the federal government provided billions of dollars to communities across the United States to address water quality problem, surface water. So contaminated lakes and the rivers and streams, sources that were important to all communities that relied on surface water resources. And the point of that money was to build sewers, update sewers, create better treatment technology for wastewater. So when that wastewater was discharged back in the environment, it would not become a source of pollution to that water and all. Nassau decided that it was going to take advantage of that money, and it built sewers all throughout the county, and now it's about 90% sewer. But it knew at the beginning that it was facing a choice, because when you put septic systems, you use your water and then you dump that water down the drain or down the toilet. It goes into your septic tank and that drains back into the ground and also play back into the groundwater. So you are essentially recycling that water, but you are taking clean water and putting dirty water back into the ground, which ultimately became polluted. If you capture that wastewater and instead of putting it in a septic tank, you collect it and send it to a sewage treatment plant, and that plant discharges that treated wastewater to the ocean or to the sound. You've now cut off a supply of water that goes back into the ground to maintain the amount of water in storage and aquifer. So they knew at the outset that they were choosing between protecting quality or maintaining cost, and they chose quality. But they knew that over time they were going to end up depleting the aquifer because they were depriving it of this recycling of the water. And in fact, they saw changes in the water table drop. They've had now saltwater recursion issues, and they continue to pump a lot of water. So collectively, they see the consequences, and they don't like some of the results, but that was the choice or the decision they had to make. Suffolk had a different situation. It started, the BCs, that was the Southwest this route. And in the process of building the collection system, they ran into a number of scandals over the quality of the pipes and cost overruns and all sorts of issues that roiled the politics of Suffolk County in those days. And as a consequence, talking about sewering across Suffolk County became political dung-like. And no politician wanted to raise to the public, well, let's go back in and build more sewers. So the only recourse for the county was to continue to rely on septic systems and cesspools as the way to handle human sanitary waste. And now the county has built out tremendously since those days, yet it still is depending on septic systems. So about 25% of the county is still on septic system to on-site wastewater technologies, and the rest is 25% sewer and 75% reliant on septic systems and the consequences of that are you're contaminating your groundwater, you are causing drinking water wells to be contaminated, and the nitrogen in that waste water is getting out into your surface waters, the ponds, the lakes, the coastal estuaries, and so forth, and then degrading that environment, making the waters of poor quality, killing fish and killing habitats, downstream habitat, and having impact with cars, seeking aid to energy. So those are the consequences of what Suffolk made. And now it's probably kind of correct with their position and their goal.
So NASA had a choice. It had much less water. It had a much smaller geographical area. And there was federal money available for sewer across the country. They took that money and they made a choice between water quality and water quantity. They only cared about water quality. They intentionally kept pumping the water without considering the quantity in the aquifer. And so NASA's in a position now where they're starting to run out of water, and then, eventually they might have to find another supply. All the data across the island is 35 years old. And luckily, preliminary data is out in December for the first kind, right? And then it'll be finalized next year. They've been drilling wells across the islands to get new data on the actual state of our aquifers. You can look at the aquifers and learn all the different kinds of things by looking at the shapes and the boundaries of the saltwater and freshwater. Aquifers are not stagnant bodies of water. The fresh water is constantly flowing through the aquifer and pushing against the salt water. So you can be looking at this boundary all the time and learn a lot about what's been going on in that system. So in Suffolk County, largely because of these scandals, so once again, politics got in the way of our public health. So our groundwater is jeopardizing the health of our neighbors as well as our future children. It's very sad. We're not being told and getting clear information on that. And so we need to address this issue because we're using stone-age technology in Suffolk County. Septic and septic system costs 75% of Suffolk County. We're having ribbons of sewage, ribbons of contaminated water that make it, that's the sewage are taking it too far, but ribbons of contaminated water that has come from a sewage stream going into our aquifers constantly, and we've been okay with that. And if those ribbons connect, you've heard about plumes, that's where one of the plumes are coming from. And then we're not even talking about how different our society is today with how many chemicals we use. And those chemicals are going right into the groundwater because we're not even getting the natural processes that help break down and clean this water, such as mixing it, exposing it to sunlight so it could get broken down. And so sewers can allow us another option of being able to capture this water and appropriately treat it to get rid of all these things that are jeopardizing our health in Suffolk County. Okay, yeah. So do we get does it why we're having this today? This is what we need more of. This is the responsibility of our government to provide information and venue. Can look very wonderful here. So on the right there, and then we'll.
I have a long question because I want your opinion on what I should be stressing about in my fever dreams. So yeah, it's constant. I obsess about everything, so I dug a little deeper into this issue than I normally would have. Okay. So I am aware that there are toxic plumes in Suffolk County, one being in Holbrook, one being out in Speonk. The Speonk one keeps me up at night, even though I don't live in the Hamptons, that once it hits the bay, it's going to be catastrophic to wildlife. One of the things I feel that's been happening in Suffolk is that we're not paying attention to this as a community, but also not as a legislator and as a governmental body. So my question is 100-fold. what is the biggest threat to Suffolk County's water right now? Is it the lack of sewers and the fact that when I go on the beach in the Great South Bay, I sometimes see human excrement floating because it overflowed from the cesspools? Is it because of the warehouse building that's prolific right now throughout our community, which I know is taking away natural filters for our water, right? Because we're losing trees and greenery. Or is it the fact that we don't have real sewers which is also impeding businesses and homes and communities in the area? And the last question is the failure of the remediation of the toxic plumes and the underreporting of the contaminated wells, because I know that in Holbrook we have wells that are still currently shut down because of metals that are in them from previous contamination from like the 80s, the 70s, and the 60s. So out of all of that, what should I be the most worried about so I can advocate for fixing, problem A, B, C, D, E, or F?
Well, I have a question for you to start with. Are you concerned about your drinking water? Do you drink the tap water or do you not?
I'm concerned about pretty much all of the water because, yes, I cook with the tap water, even though, I'm kind of cringing when I do it. I know sometimes my kids don't care and they'll come and, when the bottles are gone of water, they will drink whatever's available, even the hose. But I also, I stopped going to beaches because on the South Shore because I see that they're contaminated. So we'll go, but no one will go in the water because I know what's floating in it. So I'm the wrong one to ask because I worry about it all.
Okay, so that's a lot to cover. Oh, it always is.
Let me go one at a time. So if you're concerned about drinking water quality, not difference of you or family, I drink tap water. I don't have any reservations about it. But in order to put tap water, it should be safe and to meet state rule, federal rule. And the state rules are stronger than the federal. The water supplier at the meet is a year about that. Some of the highest standards in the United States when it comes to drinking water quality. And in order to do that, they spend an ungodly amount of money. So we're all paying the price, and people are still fearful about toxic chemicals in the water that they don't know about, is they may be consuming, and they don't know what's going to do to the health. But we don't know all the answers. We never will know all the answers because new chemicals pop up that we never thought were a problem. And because we live on top of our water supply, things can get down into the ground and into the aquifer and eventually into wells that we don't want in there. And so it may take us a while to discover some new problem. But when we know of a problem that's quality related, you respond. And usually that means we're going to have to install some kind of special technology, remove that specific chemical from the resource, the groundwater source, before it goes into the piping systems that's brought to your house. So we're doing everything we can as a society on Long Island and in the escape and ensure that the drinking water is safe for public consumption, as that is the goal. Now, we have this crazy situation where we're spending tons and tons, millions and millions of dollars putting new treatment technology in for use with one chemical or another. And then we take that water in the summer and we spray it around on our lawns and our gardens and everything. And 50% of that water evaporates before it ever gets to the grass. And then once it gets to the grass, some of the water gets taken up, but the rest of the water is in the ground at that point. Does not go back to the aquifer, but it simply evaporates. So we are consuming huge levels of water in the summer to put on grass to keep it green for 3 months or for once out the year. When the summer is gone, the grass stops growing. It's not so hot. We're not watery anymore. And so our water use comes down to a level it is reasonable and sustainable. But when we collectively look at all the water we use here on Long Island, in Nassau and in Suffolk, These two communities use more water per person than any community along the Atlantic coastline from North Carolina to Montauk Point. We are the mega consumers of water. And normally in the past, nobody mentioned the fact that we can harm the aquifer if we take chemical water out of it. So we've grown up with a culture of water is an unlimited resource and it's so cheap. Those days are coming to an end. They came to an end sooner in Nassau because it's in a more critical state. But as population grows and development expands across Suffolk County, it's becoming more and more of a concern. You saw this summer, again, now that we're having another summer drought period, this is the third year in a row that we've had this issue. The Suffolk Water Authority is telling people don't water your lawns, period. Only water once a week, or, stop using waters. That is because, one, we don't want to deplete the groundwater, but two, they have designed their system, their water distribution system, to meet a reasonable level of demand. And when we get into these hot, dry periods, and people are thinking, I'm out of grass is turning brown, my flowers are drying up, I need the water every day or very frequently, they simply can't pump enough water to keep up with demand. Now, it may not matter to you the water is coming out more slowly out of their faucet, so that's one consequence. But secondly, water suppliers are required to maintain a certain pressure level in the system for firefighting. And when the pressure in the tanks that are storing this extra water in the reserve drops too low, they can't meet their firefighting pressure obligations. That puts them at risk as a water supplier. So we're seeing now the ripple effects of a historic perception that water was unlimited. And it's that, a couple of decades before now, water suppliers' actions told people we have an unlimited supply of water on Long Island. It was never true. Now they've kind of caught up with the science, the reality of the cow water is replacing the aquifer and how it's stored and so forth. So they're not telling people that myth anymore. That's where we are right now in terms of protecting the groundwater. Septic systems, as Kelly said, are very fragmented. So if you have a cesspool, all you have is a hole in the ground. And you put your wastewater in it, and the solids stay in the cesspool, and the liquids drain out. That's which is a hole in the ground, basically. There's a retaining wall. One step beyond that is a septic tank, which is typically a concrete ball with maybe two chambers, one chamber in, then a second chamber, and then water leaves that goes out into a leaching field. The liquids leave the tank, the solids stay behind, and then the leaching field puts that liquid waste back into the ground, and it eventually can get down into the aquifer. Very primitive treatment. The only treatment that's really going on is settling, which brings the solids down to the bottom of the container, and bacterial activity breaks down some of the organic debris. That's it. So, as Kelly said, we're really relying on very primitive technology, and people will come on to Long Island or New Jersey or other parts of the country and are shocked that a modern county this size would still be relying on cesspools and septic systems. Others, in addition to that, beyond putting that contamination then into the groundwater, that groundwater flows to the coastline, whether it's the Sound or whether it's the Great South Bay and the South Shore. It comes into wetlands, and high levels of nitrogen are harmful to the wetland plants. And so that's a problem. Because the plants in the wetlands are on the barriers to these storms that come in. And if the storm water and the storm surge has to go through the wetland, it gets slowed down and the wetland helps slow all of that extra water. It also affects our habitat. And as you know, wetlands are nurseries for a lot of fish and other kinds of wildlife. that come in that sheltered area to spawn and raise their young, and then they burn back into the rest of the environment. So it affects the quality in the wetlands. It also affects some of the quality in the coastal waters. And when we have big storms, in addition to normal stormwater runoff, is you have a failing septic dam. That gets added to the mix of the bacterial load that is in that runoff water. So when you hear the beaches are closed, that's due primarily to rainwater runoff, which is carrying animal waste, dog waste, bird waste, other kind of mammals, their waste. And if it's coming from a failing septic system, it may carry human waste as well. So we close the beaches, let the water get diluted with clean incoming coastal water, and let the bacteria get broken down and just disperse. And then humans can go back into the water, and it's reasonably safe for them to be in contact with that swimming water. So that's why we almost always add big beach closing when we have stormwater event. And the health department goes out into the waters, takes water samples that confirm that there is a bacterial load that would trigger a beach closing. It doesn't last forever. There's a couple of days of bleeding that runoff disperse into the coastal waters, and fresh ocean water come in and take its place. So you're not going to go to the beach for the first few days after a rain event because you want that cleansing process to take place. And then once the beaches are open, you should feel comfortable, unless there's some special issue that's going on, to enjoy the coastal waters. And what was your last? The plumes going into the coastal waters. Okay, so plumes, this is why groundwater science is important. A plume is an narrow stream of pollution that migrates kind of intact through hollow of the aquifer, the same area. If you pour pollution into a pond, what happens to it? It disperses relatively evenly through the water, and that because of wind and waves and currents and so forth. Groundwater does not work like that. It normally flows in more or less a straight line from the source to the point where it is discharged. All right? So it's not dispersing through the groundwater in the same way that it disperses in surface water. So that clue is coming along, and when it hits the coastline, if it does, is probably a relatively shallow break. So if it comes in and this part is a stream near the shoreline into the estuary, or maybe offshore outside. Once it gets into these open coastal water, again, it's going to be dispersed, it's going to be polluted, and the toxic effects are not because you're going to be drinking that water, because it's not, but is there some kind of contamination that would hurt the bird community or the fish community or whatever? So you can feel comfortable that the flows that are of local concern are not affecting the coastal waters to the point that you should be frightened about it. What we want to do is to capture that plume of pollution and treat it so that it doesn't reach the shorelines, if possible, and collects the groundwater and treats it, at some point so that there's no further flume progressing beyond that point that they're capturing pollution there. Does that make sense?
It does. The issue is no one wants to pay for that.
Well, if you know who the polluter is, then we've got state and federal laws that if we identify them, we can make them pay. So the policy historically has been polluter pays if we can find a polluter. We have Superfund money set aside of public money now. And if we can't find the polluter, public money will go in and pay for that cost. Remember, Long Island has the highest number of Superfund sites, either state or federal, in New York State. And this is especially problematic for us because we drink groundwater. Most of the state drinks surface water. So when there are pollution periods or pollution sites in other parts of the state, it may not be such a big consequence for them because it's not necessarily affecting the drinking water. All of the flows that we deal with at Superfund runs by threatening the groundwater supply in one way or another.
Thank you.
So Stephanie, hopefully she caught a couple of questions. No, there were a bunch out there. So the key is your drinking water gets tested. It's safe to drink from your tap. When something happens, they have to find it, and then residents are notified and mitigation steps are taken for it, correct?
Oh, well, one is remediating, and two is deciding whether that additional chemical will be added to the drinking water regulations. So it's a kind of two-pronged of ever cleaning it up from the environment and decided whether we need an additional standard for that chemical in our drinking water laws.
And then the bay, when the beaches are closed, the bacterial count, they're being so polite to say it, it's coliform, isn't it?
Well, is that and others?
Yeah, well, so my cousin, who's also one of our water advisors on the team, is a New York State professor, a water environmental expert, and she was explaining to me the water testing they do. So when you see the word coliform, it means that those bacteria are actually from Poland. So as Stephanie says, I mean, when the beaches are closed, mostly it's from animals and other things on the surface that have done it, but that's the bacteria we're talking about. So bacteria is a nice word for a beach being closed, but because our system gets flushed with fresh water, within a few days it clears up and it's safe to go in our country they ask for it.
Once the exposure order has been lifted, then you're safe to go.
Or visiting. And then with the poops are very horrific, but once again, they're not getting into our drinking water because we're monitoring them.
Well, no, their plumes have did well, all in Nassau and Suffolk.
Plumes at a well, right? They're not getting into the public tap water that's coming.
No, they don't catch the issue reports.
So with the plume that are need to be addressed, for the public tap water that get in from your pipes, they're not being affected by them. But yes, small individual wells are affected by all these things. And we didn't talk about it, but this piecemeal approach that we're doing with package sewage treatment plants, I think you've heard of those, yes? The package treatment plants, so a small treatment site, maybe for a different development, they are notorious, as Dr. Dalen explained to me, for
Spears a poor job.
Or doing a poor job cleaning up. There's actually like a certain threshold of the amount of poor job contamination that these package plants can do without reporting anything and even getting a slap on the wrist. When they get over that threshold of many contaminations in the area, then they start looking at, because there's something we can do better. So this piecemeal approach, rather than having a county-wide transparent water treatment plan, which includes responsible sewering and cleaning up of the water, it is not keeping our water. So that was all in summary, right? They leave mother for what? I know there's something. You guys need to get up and stretch. I mean, this issue is really near to everyone.
So if the large-scale sewers like at the Nassau County protects the quality of the drinking water, but not the quantity. And our old schools, cesspools, and septic systems in Suffolk County protect the quantity of the groundwater, but quantize the quality. What's the little brown ash that we should be striving for that will keep our groundwater clean, but also not...
Well, I know that there's a lot of interest among concerned people near something that is sewer water implemented in Jerry Sunbury, that the treatment plants for that collected wastewater has a high level of treatment capacity, to the point where that water, instead of being dumped into the ocean, can be brought back and recharged to the groundwater at some points to help close the leak. So clean the water, the wastewater, up to a point that would allow it to be recharged back to that aquifer, like the septic tank you're doing, but they degraded the aquifer, and this would help mankind upon you. So that's, I think, the solution that a lot of people are going for. And then secondarily, using replacement septic systems that also have a higher level of treatment capability. Right now, the systems, the enhanced systems that are being required in the county are looking to treat nitrogen and to bring the nitrogen levels in wastewater down. But nitrogen is only one of the issues that are concerned with quality in the groundwater system. And so hopefully in the future, as we make progress on these on-site systems on the whole, they will start to treat more of the contaminants, the lower end wastewater, beyond just
I'll hold that thing. So on our tables, there's also a little chart, and it shows you a bunch of the sewer systems. So sewer treatment information across Suffolk County. And if you look at the outfall column, the majority of all the current sewage treatment plants in Suffolk County do currently outfall into groundwater. So when someone said that they've been voting against sewage because they don't want us just dumping our water, into the bay or into the ocean, there's only a few systems that have been doing that. And so obviously we want to make sure we're prioritizing systems that have this groundwater outfall that's treating at the tertiary level treatment. But more than that, that just seems free. That doesn't tell you what you're doing. We need to be addressing what's in the water, the type of chemicals, the type of nitrogen. And once again, it goes back to transparency. So you cannot get all the way to the most important part, which is talking about what are you doing when you're recharging the groundwater? Has it been cleaned enough when you're doing it? So these are the conversations that is the responsibility of our local government. And you would say that it's okay that some of our sewers are outflowing into the oceans. Our aquifers can handle having some of our outflow going to the ocean, which our local community in Oakdale wanted, and we had 94 from Bill Lindsay, the prior legislator. He had over $25 million in state funding. It kicked in so the homeowners would have to pay anything in Oakdale to connect, and they wanted that sewers, and they deserved a community vote on it. Yes, that water was going to get dumped into the ocean, but their quality of life is massively affected. They're washing dishes, doing laundry, flushing your toilets. And as we've heard before, nobody wants their septic system to be leaching, waste into the water. We all love our water, and it's a failure of government to give them the tools to be have the system that they deserve. You are now.
Yes, sir. I had two questions. One was just asked, and you've answered very well. Like, the other question was, what about land subsidence? I haven't heard you talk about.
Okay, thank you for that question. Hallie told me that someone was concerned about that. So maybe 5 months ago or 6 months ago, the New York Times, has been running a series about groundwater across the United States over several years now. And they had a big article talking about ground societies around the country. And that's basically where the land sinks. And everything sitting on the land sinks there. And it talked about a number of the major metropolitan areas around the United States that have this problem. It's a huge problem in Florida. Houston is an example of massive subsidence. All along California, in the agricultural area, they're having land subsidence. And countries around the world are having subsidence problems. We on Long Island are not having a ground subsidence problem because our geology is not of a type that will lend itself to the land sinking. Houston has a lot of clay under it, and they depleted the water table and the clay from fresh, and the land sank. Florida has limestone everywhere, and the limestone has big holes and caverns in it. And when you take the water out, the land, the caverns, the top of the cavern breaks open, and you have these neat sinkholes. And in California, when they had those massive droughts a couple of years back, and everybody started pumping groundwater in the agricultural district, and had very, very significant suicide there. We have a sand and gravel aquifer system. We have three main aquifer formations stacked like a layer cake, one on top of the other. And the aquifer itself was made up of sand, with some layers of browse. So where is the water in the aquifer? It is in those really, really tiny spaces between one sand grain and another. So the sand grains are sitting on top of each other. So whether there's water in that space when you're in the groundwater, or whether there's nothing but air in that space. So you're above the east of the water table, up high of the groundwater. The structural integrity of that sand sitting on top of itself doesn't change. So we don't have subsidence here on Long Island. The clay layers are so deep, they would never be blue water and work with structural integrity. So, we have many, many furloughs on island, but fortunately, land subsidence is not something we need to deal.
So you guys actually know what the aquifers look like. I know we have follow-up too. Make sure we get that too. When you're on the beach and your kid's digging us in the sand and all of a sudden there's water there, that's literally what our aquifers look like. So that's the geology of the aquifers on Long Island. And this is very important to bring into local government because you have to make decisions based on the geology the area is governing. You can't pull in things that are going Houston or a little bit Florida, and where we're going. In Florida, you can't pull in those stories to make decisions here if the geology is different. And this actually translates all the way to housing. Because when you look at the excessive red sheep and fees that our local government's doing, it's because they're applying tests that aren't even relevant for the geology here. I was speaking to a commercial landlord yesterday about this. Well, door knocking, which you've been doing nearly every day, can they nine. Sorry. Did you want to ask the...
Yeah, I sort of take issue with what you said. And the reason for it is I live on Oakdale, and I've been watching my land subsidence from satellite missions. And it's going down about 10 degrees per year. At the same time, the sea level is going up about 10 inches per year. The delta is 0.2 inches per year. Very significant. I've been seeing flooding, living out there 30 years. I've been seeing flooding for just no reason. Good high. And I've had to build a seawall around my house, basically, to protect it. Got flooded out a few times. So I see the land going down, and I see high coming up. And it's visual. I also see a lot of spaces that were marsh areas. At one time, had some vegetation. Today, there's no vegetation. With dead trees. And that's in the salt water sea.
Right. Well, if you're built on an area that was once a swamp or a wetland, you can see some change in elevation because the subsurface foundation is degrading. So there will be some special cases where it looks like the land is subsiding. But across the island, we're united in one of the special situations. The land does not subside.
So when that second systems got put in, to meet like public health codes, they actually had to build us a berm at the edge of viewing the properties like boards that are right on the water because there has to be a difference where between the height of the water table and the bottom of your septic system when it's installed. So these artificial man-made berms that were put in to make a difference in the height, also, that structural integrity may be declining, especially if we go back to the deteriorating of the bay, because a lot of the vegetation that was stabilizing the ground under the water at the coast was eelgrass, and the roots of the eelgrass are shallower because there's nutrients in the water. So all the vegetation has been shallower, and so it's much easier for storm cloudings to knock out this vegetation more, so even more destabilizing the land. So these are the factors that I think you're seeing in your yard, rather than in a function of the water declining in the aquifer holding up the yard. Because I've seen it too. You clearly have a change in height of your backyard and the flooding. And I think it all has to do with the properties were built in places that were wetlands. There were artificial berms put in to help separate the water table height in the bottom of the septic system, as well as this massive lowering of the resilience of our entire coastline because of the poor water quality. Right? He's a professional engineer, so we got, our doctor over here. I have a doctor too, but these two are amazing, and we're meeting these people knocking on doors, and we're making a Rolodex of experts in our community entering real questions and concerns to the table. And this is what we're all about. Did you have one mic there?
Yeah.
Use your mic.
just very simply, is there a practical way to cut down on the water use on lawns? I know it's like a sinful amount of work. And is there a way that would be acceptable to people who like their gardens?
Yes. So did everyone hear the question? Yes. Is there a way to still be able to irrigate your property, but responsibly? And the first part of the answer is yes. If you have an in-ground system that you can regulate, you should put these newer smart controller systems on your irrigation system. They're programmable. They will include being able to connect to weather stations to look at weather predictions and weather conditions, and moisture sensors to see if the soil needs any more water separated. So using the smart controllers is the first step, because changing personal habits is really hard. But if you have a machine that you can simply program in, don't water when it doesn't need to be watered, or only water a maximum of twice a week and preferably once a week, then you don't have to think about it as much. It doesn't become, something you have to keep in the back of your head, because you've got this technology to do it for you. And if we could get everybody who feels the need to water their lawns and to use these smart controllers, it would help us cut down on the general overwatering or overuse of water in the summer. We've got some water districts in Nassau that are really clamping down on requiring smart controllers throughout their district, and they see a noticeable drop in summertime water use, specifically because people are relying on technology to do the job for them of monitoring the water use. Things is deciding if you really need a large expanse of grass in front of your house or beside your house. Maybe you could have something that would be more of a balanced mix between your ornamental plants, which you want to continue to water, as needed, but maybe your grass, not so much, because grass will go dormant in really dry periods. So let's ground that was ugly. But as soon as the rain comes back, it perks back up and it turns breathing in. So it's not the end of the world to, skip a little bit on watering the lawn part. If you want to spill water into your shrubs and your garbage instead of more. And then the third thing I would suggest is just in general, I would imagine that many of you know how much you pay for your water during your billing cycle. So if you're writing the check or you're putting it on the credit card, and maybe that number sticks in your head. But I will bet that hardly anyone here knows how much water that bill represents that you use. Because we never look at the amount of water that is attached to the bill. We just look at the bill and we go on, because water still remains really pretty inexpensive on Long Island compared to the rest of the world. The rest of the United States on what they pay for water. But when you look at the price of water, you see it's really high compared to what we pay here.
Hold on a second. Now, the number one problem that we need to address, that people are concerned about saltwater intrusion, is the overpumping. And that is what is the number one cause of saltwater intrusion that you'll hear people talk about. And it's something you can very much look at as science, and we'll be getting tons of information in the new report that's coming out, is to easily get this smart electronic monitor for your watering system, reconsider your landscaping options. My husband actually, because we are a military family that has lived all over the world, has done a bunch of beautiful yard we had in Colorado where water is a scarce resource. And then the third one was looking at your water bill and looking actually at the quantity you use and really getting a picture on that amount. So thank you. And once again, if you need to get up and strike, I know we're going long, but it's really valuable.
I have two questions. Well, one is just comment. You were talking about your water bill. I'd say maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, I noticed, I'm like, wow, our water bill went from like $120 for a quarter to like $600 for a quarter. I don't know if other people have had that happened. And, I didn't relate it to what you're saying, okay? And then my other question is, who is actually deciding how much chemicals and what chemicals can be in our drinking water? And is that changing according to the government? I mean, I would assume the federal government would set those regulations. Maybe that's a loaded one because we all know what's going on with the federal government and actually, destroying the EPA. But I'm wondering who's in charge of taking care of the understanding of how much chemicals in our water is acceptable.
Well, that's a really big question, and I was hoping somebody would add something along those lines. So we've got two agencies dealing with water issues. You've got the water in the ground and the quality of the groundwater itself, contamination. That's the DEC, or Department of Environment and State. And when that water becomes drinking water, then the health department sets the drinking water standards for what is acceptable quality for drinking water, and they set the standards. New York standards are stricter, as I mentioned, stricter than the federal standards, and the law allows us, the federal law, allows EPA to set the national drinking water standards. So they have to, all states have to comply with EPA rules. Each state can be stronger than EPA, not weaker. It can be stronger. And so New York has selected on a number of occasions to set drinking water rules that are stronger than, that regulate chemicals at a lower level than the EPA.
So then we are have to follow what the government is doing with Zelda in Washington.
Well, that's a good question. So we had already set our own standard for PFAS chemicals that EPA is, last year decided that it was going to set its own PFAS standards. And when they came out with the standards, they were slightly stronger than New York's. And that was before Trump came into office. Now the EPA is saying, well, that those two chemicals that had already been regulated, we're going to stick with those. So the New York standard is 10 parts per trillion. So you can't have anything more than 10 parts per trillion. And now the EPA came in and said, we're going to set the limit at 4 parts per trillion. And so New York is going to comply with 4 rather than using its own 10 limit. That all the other chemicals that were supposed to come in with that change, EPA is going to roll back.
So we'll continue, like I say, it can switch a little bit. I need to continue.
It is, well, to bring this to another level, I already to go on, but on a big mouth. We talk about water quality, and I think a lot of people might not realize, well, everybody wants good water, everyone wants good water. But if you cannot relate this whole issue to the EPA and how the water issues will be affected because we have a federal government now that wants to lower the rates of give how much councils are allowed in our water, I think that's a really good talking point. And getting back to what we're really doing here, we're talking about water from here, or here to support Kelly. And I think that's something to really bring up. I mean, people don't want to be threatened, but honestly, we're dealing with a threatening environment today. I said the first thing I said is, how is this going to relate back to the Zelda and the EPA that he's running, which I'm sure he adapts to them no understanding of environmental controllers. So that's just a point to make, that bringing up water quality issue in your campaign is that talk about what the government's currently doing to roll back year protections for us.
And to continue that, the local government are very critical in insisting that New York provide the best level of protection possible for something health issues like drinking water standards. So it's a very big point because New Zealand is going to change air quality and water quality and wastewater quality and chemical toxicity and all sorts of issues that will have direct impacts on human health in communities all across, including Ohio.
So, First off, I want to say thank you very much. I've been trying to get people to understand this issue for years. I actually work in Bethpage, in one of the old Grumman buildings by the Bethpage plume. Okay, that was caused by a degreaser, trichloroethylene, or TCE, and also people are not talking about glyphosate anymore, or Roundup. But one other thing I want to ask you about in terms of public awareness, I don't think people realize, and you alluded to it, how much water they use with their pools. Everybody on Long Island loves their pools. Okay, so not only do you try to get people to understand, hey, maybe you shouldn't use this pesticide, maybe you should use this more natural one, and that's a flaw in itself. But how do we get people to just regulate their water usage, not only with watering the lawns, but also with their pools of water?
Well, you just alluded to part of the answer, which is public education. And water utilities themselves set their own operating rules. And they can set rules that will encourage their customers not to constantly be, using fresh water, but, set a limit on how much water can be used for that pool each year. So there are ways to encourage people to do the right thing and pay attention against an amount of water that they're using. And if you look at your bill and you notice from billing cycle to billing cycle, in the summer the bill goes way up and your water use goes way up. And then in the winter it comes back down if you're using less water. And if you see that differential, it will be shocking to you.
At least that's it. I'm aware of, but most people are.
Right.
First comment, one is you cut your lawn higher, and that helps with hanging water. Instead of low, I keep it way up, and it stays beautiful. The other is I was shocked to learn that I lived in Massapequa, south of Sunrise Highway, and they put up signs one year, they've been there for years, saying that the drainage from the streets was right into the bay. It was horrible. We had sewer here, it was like went into the sewer. So anything that's on the street, from cars, trucks, whatever, boards, great. The question is, they're doing some kind of change in the septic systems where they're self-contained. Is that correct? As they came out something where they want to have self-contained septic systems.
Becky and Yeso or something?
I thought it was in sub.
Well, they're requiring the installation of new septic systems, not necessarily self-contained, and that the wastewater doesn't go anywhere. But they don't capture the wastewater so that it's pumped out. They still allow it to leach into the ground.
And why don't they? Why don't they do that? Or, routinely you get it pumped out, that you treat it, and return it to you and use on your lawn.
Well, they could do that, but they haven't chosen with you. You'd have to build a big container in your property to hold that wastewater, right? And, with the expense and so forth, that has not been a policy that leaders in Suffolk County chose.
Yes, we got another question.
Oh, I just had one per.
Well, here, make sure you do them.
I have one correction. Related to everything that's been said, but it relates to treating the water gray water, right? And I know in some other states like Florida, or some places, they use the gray water to like water gothers. And I know there's a certain amount of infrastructure involved, but is that an option more for conserving drinkable water, right? Using tertiary treated water for municipal watering, or even and one of the big questions would be conserving water, infrastructure where you use efficient toilets and stuff like that, so use less BR. Are the regulations in place for new construction use those types of infrastructure to conserve water on the delicious side?
Well, so your main question is about using extra or highly treated water back into the environment. That's what it's called.
Yeah, well, low place of damage.
So you know that there is a program now in Riverhead where the river that water goes through an additional treatment step, and then the water is piped over to Buff Fords and it's used to irrigate. So that is going on, and then there are a couple of other dog force situations around Long Island that are now looking at that because they're in close enough proximity to a situation that getting the water for the Gulf Force could not usual, to be undertaken. And that does say the Gulf Force not having to pop its own water everywhere. So there are some issues though, because tertiary water treatment, which is primary, secondary, is all the law requires. If you want more, they could go to the third level, which is tertiary treatment. But that is focused on the specific pollutant that you want to remove out of that waste stream before you use it again. We have health department people who have a real problem with taking even tertiary treated wastewater and putting it in settings where people can come in contact with that water. So it's not just a matter of, okay, I'm going to treat it at a tertiary level and then it's safe to use. That is not the situation. You have to really look at what's in that flow, that waste stream. If there's things there that need to come out before you reuse the water, the health department's going to have a voice in that. And normally you want that user to be relatively close to the host line so that water does not trickle down in any way back into the aquifer, because you don't want the golf course becoming a source of future contamination. So there are a lot of issues. Now, some people say, well, why can't I just use some of the wastewater, like the laundry and the dishwasher, and do things like that as a supplement to, say, my gardens, or something like that. So I don't know that there's anything wrong with that, but we're just not designing the houses to accommodate that kind of use. So it's not so much that we can't do it, but there are a number of hurdles that may not be readily apparent to people when they talk about how to reuse wastewater from, say, wastewater treatment plant. So if that plant has a lot of industrial waste coming, it may not be a good candidate. But if it's got a lot of residential wastewater coming into it, it won't have kind of heavy toxic loads that industrial waste might have. And it might be a good candidate if it's in the right location. Basically, you must ask the answer for your question.
It makes sense.
So we're backwards in some ways, you said that.
Well, every answer has answered the price tag. And it's really a question of what people are willing, what they want, and what they're willing to support by.
Well, I'm going to tell us something. I'm going to say something funny, just because we need select. It was 15 years ago, my friend came here from the Netherlands, and she came in January. And she looked around and she goes, I don't know if anybody knows a Dutch accent. They're quite funny, okay? And I can't repeat how exactly she said it. Just, I can't believe all the wires. She couldn't believe that we had so many wires everywhere, because in the Netherlands, which of course is old communities, they have everything underground. So, that has nothing to do with the water, but I think it just shows that as a society, we are not demanding that we come up to some kind of basic level of that's something that's not in you. Yeah. I thought that was just like, yeah, really.
So I think Karen actually getting her good summary of this, because there are a lot of chemical solutions and technology that we have available that is not overdeveloping and turning our neighborhoods into Queen. It's bringing us up and retaining our quality of life. And as a military family, we've been fortunate to live all over the place. We've seen beautiful communities that respect the culture that they've had, and they're doing that with modern technology and solutions that protect their health and protect the environment. And so it's completely sensationalizing thing. And a lot of it is because, and Dr. Meyland said, it costs a lot of money. And normally politicians, they don't want to spend money today that helps you in 30 years. They want to spend money today that gets them elected today. And that's not why Dave and I are running, because we've been community helpers our whole lives. and we just want to keep helping. And I think we have had so much your kind. We're so grateful. Can come up and for a few minutes.
I just want to thank Kelly for inviting me. It's been a pleasure talking about water with you. And I just want to say, with respect to Kelly, she has demonstrated that she knows the issues and is committed to protecting the public and the public's environmental resources. And she is a great handle and a full supporter.
That was so kind, and I didn't know you were going to end that way because my husband can do a test. But I'm in a situation of not knowing something. I started doing research, and I didn't know how to feed my baby. I was reading peer-reviewed articles about case feeding. And so when I didn't feel like I knew enough about our water situation, I started digging in and reading, and we really only connected a month ago. And so what an honor to have one of our most prestigious, incredible water experts on Long Island give that birth. And if you had noticed in the beginning, he had our county town teams up, and so I'm going to bring back up Dave Chance. If you notice Dowling, and now he's getting better, and we owe an immense gratitude to Dave and all the volunteers that have been helping him along the way. He's gotten new property managers in there, he's cleaned up the space, he's gotten some accountability going on, he's brought the police department back in to do dog treating, he's lowered vandalism, he's volunteered his time and money. And this is all before he's elected. And as somebody said, if he does this but he's not elected, well, he's been accused for evil.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for coming. Because this is the middle of the afternoon as you guys took time out of your lives to actually be here for Kelly's informational fundraiser. So it's fantastic. So thank you, everybody. I'll be quick. I know somebody's been sitting here for a while and everything. My name's Dave Chan. I live in Oakville. Actually, fortunate that I live close to Jose, so he's my good source of scientific information regarding water quality and sewers and stuff like that. But I was the Oakville civic president for about 4 years. I started the Idle Hour Neighborhood Watch to basically stop the criminal activities and vandalism at the Dowling College. That's what led me to this position, to run for office. I'll give you a quick background. I did 30 years in law enforcement. I was a NYPD detective assigned to the Joint Terrorism Task Force. Actually got assigned to the Joint Terrorism Task Force for Y2K. So if you go back, I guess, at that point, there was 36 detectives, 36 FBI agents, and we were the only Joint Terrorism Task Force in the nation. And it was stationed out of the New York waters. And then obviously 9/11 hit, and we grew to Pittsburgh, where it actually is now, where there's a Joint Terrorism Task Force in every major city in the United States. I retired from there. I actually worked 8 years at Bogota Airport as an investigator for the town. So my life is here. I'm a homeowner in Oakdale. My daughter goes to school in Oakdale. My wife is a special ed teacher in Brentwood. So I'm like everybody here. I had a stake in what goes on in my local community. We've been having this sewer talk. I've been in Oakdale for over 8 years, and for the 8 years I've lived there, you've always heard this fairy tale that the sewers are coming. And we still hear it to this point. We're not even sure if we're going to actually have a vote. There's talk about it, but nobody even knows what the final cost is going to be. There's talks about the grants. There was talk about past grants. There was talk about infrastructure money and everything else. So the talk about finally sewers being presented to the residents, hopefully it will happen soon. But it's something, again, outside of the sewers. It just recently was in the paper. The talk of the Oakdale merge was just recently in the paper. And I got to tell you, I've been living on Long Island for over 20 years, and that's the other fairy tale, the Oakdale merge, what's going to happen. It affects everybody. Jose and I, a bunch of people that live here that live in Oakdale, we know exactly when the merge is backed up because the backup of traffic goes right into our community. And we can't be with track in the Oakdale community. We can't go east or west because the merge holds us hostage. So it's the same kind of concept with the sewers and the merge. And I'm hoping that with the change in leadership in the town and the county, that we can actually give the residents that live here some answers for how important it is. Off topic, there was talk about the air. When they were talking about the water, I can tell you, I'm a 9/11 first responder. I was there. I worked thousands of hours down at Ground Zero about 3 years ago. Thank you to a couple of people who fight to keep the 9/11 medical still going. It's sad that they're still up in the Capitol fighting for the refunds that the president felt that he needed to slash. I was diagnosed 3 years ago with 9/11 lung. So it's the early onset of COPD. There's a lot of us that are in that thing. We were told by the government back then that the air was safe. Some of us affected immediately. Some of us, the time frame has caught up, it's caught up to me. I try to stay as healthy as I can. I think that was help. I'm a marathon runner. My times are not as fast as they used to be because of the issues that I'm going through. This is the problem that is starting up in Washington, and it's coming down to us. Why can't the fund, the 9/11 fund, be funded forever? Why does every 3 or 4 years we have to have volunteers go and fight for these things to get passed again?
That we have to steer that way.
I feel this directly. Twice a year I have to go for my physical with the World Trade Center medical. This year it was canceled. I had an appointment in February. It got canceled because of the budget cuts when the president took office, and he laid off half the staff. So I was able to get back in April. But there are a lot of guys and ladies, not even just first responders, people who live down Ground Zero, that it directly affects them. They're all part of this program, and the funding is not there. And the federal government has failed us. So we need the voices like Kelly and I to get in office so we can make these changes. And thank you for your time.
Ed O'Donnell, so I don't know if you guys know, but the South Shore citizens have been revamped, and you're so grateful for his grassroots leadership. Want to welcome, or I should say Ed, because it's not Mike, it's the South Shore citizens would love to welcome you all to their meet and greet September 28th, right? Or 28th. It's for you guys to mingle and collaborate, and I want to emphasize this is the whole South Shore. So we got whole rep members, Fullsville members, Waukegan members. Please, not just Oak Hill, West Sable, and Bayport, but come connect with friends. Reach out to the South Shore citizen, and I'll let Ed close us out.
Okay, I'm here. This is what's called a bad slot at a stand-up comedy. I'd like to thank all of our speakers today and people who supported this event. Grant from Long Island Federation of Labor, who was a Red Level sponsor. Angelo from Local 1102. Dr. Sarah Meyland, we already thanked her. She was great. Councilman Jorge Guadron, who we worked on his initial campaign when he was first elected. And Minority Leader Jason Richberg, who also came to speak today. In terms of going forward, Kelly is like an excellent candidate, as we told her when we first met her. She was TV ready to go as a candidate. And I think when you see her today speaking, you understand why. Local elections are people vote at 50% turnout of what they vote for national election. Given the stake, we talked about the federal government this, the federal government that. Is there really still a federal government? I don't know. But, if we do not turn out for this election and show them that we're here, we're local, we're not happy, and we will vote you all the hell out, they're going to rip on us more than they already have tried to do. So talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors. You can now mail-in vote. You could register still. It comes to your house. You could do it one day. You're done. There's early Mode starting in late October, and then there's regular day, election day. But we have to do everything we can to get David and Kelly elected this cycle. So last thing we're going to do is my co-executive producer, Ray Horton, back there behind the camera, wishes a photograph with all of us so we could all appear. That would be great.
Because we're all like family. So I'd like to do a group photo with Kelly.
The troll.
Anyone needs a couch? Easy.
It's amazing. This is my old phone. It's about 6 years old. It's still
Yeah. And it's probably still got a ton of battery.
that's